So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this GIRI forum. Today, we're addressing how can technology help with measuring competence and what might the pitfalls be. I'm going to do a brief introduction to GIRI for those of you who are not familiar with us, and of course, apologies to our seasoned GIRI forum veterans. And then I'll hand over to Melanie, who's going to lead the session. On the housekeeping front, please can I ask you to mute your microphones if you're not speaking, but it's nice to see your faces. So if you're happy to leave your videos on, that'd be great. Gives the meeting a bit more feeling vitality. If you have any questions as we go through, then please use the chat box and we'll try and pick those up as we go through and put them to our panel. And if you have any tech problems, well, my advice is turn off and have another go, because that's what tech people always seem to get away with. And except, of course, this knowledgeable group today, just leave the meeting and rejoin. The Get It Right initiative was formed in 2015, and we carried out a research project looking at waste in the industry on error. There were a number of organisations contributed to to fund that research, and this is what we found. The direct cost of error, which I think most of us would recognise the resources we use in correcting errors, but less obvious, the indirect cost of error. This is the impact on other people and other operations when errors occur. Unrecorded process waste, which is where errors occur, they're not recorded, they're put right and people move on, but nonetheless there's been that cost and that impact. And then, of course, latent defects, which unfortunately we're all familiar with, which are errors which come to light after, and costs which come to light after infrastructure or buildings have been handed over. So we can see that 5%, but it's like an iceberg, and 22 billion pounds a year. If you say that 100 billion pounds is the approximate GDP for the construction industry, this is how much we're wasting through error, and this is what GIRI is trying to address. And how are we going about that? Well, we have our thought leadership side through our training. We have a number of training courses that are available through the website. We have campaigns where we work with the marketing side of our operation to campaign about what's going on in the industry and how GIRI can help. And we have forums such as this where we give people the opportunity to speak about their particular issues. We carry out a fair bit of research. In fact, we're doing more research this year, looking particularly at the original research and how things have changed over those 6 or so years. We have a fairly high social media presence, and we, as we've come out now from the full effects of COVID, we're going to be setting up more networking events so we can all meet together. So productivity was our main objective when we first set ourselves up, and we've had some further impact on that. We're working with HS2 at the moment, looking at the efficiency benefits of an error reduction program. But we can also speak about the safety implications. 37% of accidents occur during rework, so you can improve your safety. Obviously, we're saving on carbon through less waste. Quality is improved by definition, and this helps us to be more predictable with our outcomes and give us all a better reputation, both as an industry and as individual operations. This is what we're doing in GIRI 2022. You can see the technology group meetings mentioned there, but there's a fair amount to go out there, and we're looking for our members to get involved and to invite new members to the piece. So that's enough at the moment about GIRI. I'm now going to hand over to Melanie, who's going to lead the session.
That's great, Cliff. Thanks so much. Everybody's very welcome today, and thank you for joining us at this tech group forum. I'll start with just a quick introduction. So my name's Melanie Dawson. I'm a director at Origin 7, a BIM and digital construction consultancy company, and I'm also the tech group lead here at GIRI. So we're going to discuss the topic between Stefan, Paul, Steve and I. We'll all take about sort of 5 or 6 minutes each just to share our thoughts and our views on that. And there is a chat box here as well. So if you have any questions or suggestions or thoughts, if you want to pop those in the chat box as we talk through the ideas, we can pick those up at the end and also answer any other questions that you might have there as well. So I'll kick the session off by just talking a little bit about whether or not technology can help measure competence and what my thoughts are on that. So I think the first thing that's important here is that we're clear on what competence means. And again, I think for different people, competence means different things. I've seen something pop up there in the chat just about there's no slides. There are no slides for this part, so this will just be us discussing it. It was just Cliff that was going to show the slides there. So in terms of competence, what does competence actually mean, or what does it mean for most people? For me, personally, if you're talking about competence, it's really about having a good quality, sufficient knowledge in a particular subject or a particular area that you work in. So for me, that would be BIM or digital construction, and for you, that will be obviously different things. It's about being able to exercise sound judgment and have a really strong core knowledge base that you're building your competence on. And again, I think competence is something that grows with experience. So the more that you work in a particular field or you specialize in a particular area, typically speaking, your competence will grow, and you learn every time with every new project or every new piece of work that you do. And incrementally, then you will improve the processes that you apply to your project. Your competence grows, and the people who work with you then benefit from that as well. So that's what I think competence is anyway. And I think competence sits hand in hand really with continuous improvement and also driving excellence. So again, just back to that repetition piece, I think the more times we do something, the better we get at those particular things, and that starts to drive excellence. As an industry, that's what we're trying to do. And I suppose particularly from a GIRI perspective, where we're trying to drive quality, excellence is really important, and the things that we can learn from each iteration of a process is really important. For me, in association really with the continuous improvement, particularly for the field that I would work in, standardization is incredibly important as well. And by that I'm talking about, specifically for me, it would be standardization of data and structured data. A lot of the time when I'm working with different clients, they will say, well, no two construction projects are the same and we can't standardize this. But I think there's a huge opportunity to standardize the information that we work with and to put a structure to that, so we're not starting from scratch every single time. And again, that's where the competence comes in, knowing what data to ask or knowing how to structure that, create that standardization, and then you get that repetition. Once you can create a standardized system, then you can start to link that to technology. And that's whenever the technology can really help you to automate and drive forward a lot of that information. And in return, what you get is the ability to do lots of analytics with the data, and it also gives much greater transparency. And again, from a competence perspective, I think whenever you can demonstrate transparency, you're able to report clearly on information. It demonstrates that you fully understand the problem or the challenge, and that you have an answer to everything. And again, with the technology side of things, it's often a real-time response as opposed to a more analog response, which you may have had without the technology. On saying that, I also think that technology does not have all of the answers. And I think what's really important is that we have the value of the skilled people here behind all of this. So we do need experts in key areas, in key disciplines. And those experts, really what we should be challenging them to do is to define clear processes so that we can all follow those. So whether it's people following the processes or it's processes that we can automate through technology, again, I think we can debate that to decide who's best placed to do it. Again, similarly, I think what we need to do is use the technology to help us drive forward lessons learned. And again, using the analytics and the features that come from the technology and the reporting functionality within that is really important as well. I think one of the key things that we're hearing a lot in the media and different articles is around skills shortages as well, particularly in our industry. And again, I think people are looking for better paid work. They're looking for less manual work as well. And again, I think that's where the technology comes in to complement the competence of some people. So again, if we can use our competent people to automate more of the more mundane processes, it means then the people are working on the more complex tasks, and we have the software and the hardware doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the background, which can only be a win-win. Bearing in mind we have a skills shortage and people wanting better jobs really in a more I suppose a more tech-focused industry. In terms of what goes wrong then, and again, this is something I experience all the time, one of the quotes that I would hear from a lot of the people I work with is, we bought the software, but it doesn't do what we thought it would. So they've maybe had a really good sales pitch on this particular piece of technology, whether it's a piece of hardware or a piece of software. They've spent an awful lot of money on it, and it just simply doesn't do what they thought it was going to do. And generally speaking, the reason behind this is they haven't clearly defined the processes or what they wanted that particular piece of technology to do, or they don't have the competent people to drive that piece of machinery, that piece of software, that piece of technology. And that's when it all starts to, I suppose, fall apart a little bit. What I would tell any of the clients that I'm working with is two things. So first of all, don't buy anything until you have your processes defined and you know what people are going to do with it and how they're going to use it. And the second thing would be to have a look at the technology that they already have. A lot of companies will duplicate on technology, or they will have other pieces that have similar functionality. So I would encourage any company who's looking at technology to help their people to do an audit of the existing technology that they have, map out the functionality of that, and then decide where the gaps are before they choose to invest in any more technology to help with that. So that's my thoughts on it in a nutshell. So in terms of, can technology help measure competence? My answer would be yes, it can help measure competence, and it can complement those using it if it's put in a structured way. So if it's there, using those clearly defined processes and enabling the people to focus on more skilled tasks that require the human mind to help drive forward the changes and the improvements within an organisation. So that's my thoughts on it, and I'm going to pass over now to Steve Green, and Steve's going to share his thoughts on it now as well. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. So it's going to be interesting. Let's see whether we all have a different definition of competence as we go around. So firstly, I think particularly at the moment, off the back of the Building Safety Bill, we defined competence as this SCEB acronym, which is skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviour. And then we extend that, if it's a business, to also their organisational capability. So I think in terms of measuring this in the construction industry, we're all probably familiar with the CSCS card test on the touch screen, so that we can get our card. And then I think over the last 2 years, through COVID and lockdown, we've probably experienced more than ever before the use of online and e-learning. And I think many businesses are using this for the sort of statutory stuff like GDPR training, modern slavery, bribery and corruption. And I've worked in businesses where this has also been used for the 9001 management system competence assessment as well. And I think we could use this when new starters join the business for sort of onboarding new employees. And then I think it's sophisticated enough with the right algorithms to then manage the growth of that individual in the business and what further training and competence they need to achieve. And I think we probably all know from experience, you need a variety of engaging questions through the competence assessment, rather than the rather mundane multiple choice that you might get on the CSCS. Referencing back to the last GIRI members meeting, Dawn Hillier of CITB, who's involved in the Building Safety Programme Working Group 2, shared with us what she'd been doing on the competence framework for fire critical installers. And I think they'd already identified several issues. And even in this small group, there's a multitude of job roles involved. each of these job roles is starting from a different place. And Dawn admitted it's going to take years just for this relatively small group to get a level playing field. And within the trade bodies that she's already looking at, that I think skills and knowledge are well covered, but behaviours seems to be the blind spot where there's inconsistent or maybe missing assessment from the different occupational standards. So that was Dawn's view, but personally, I think that's probably typical of the industry generally. In addition, I think whenever you're assessing competence, whether it's with technology or not, it needs to be consistent. So we need to have a consistent measure across the industry, contractor to contractor, consultant to consultant. But I think, particularly off the back of the Building Safety Bill, it needs to connect trades, managers and professionals, and it needs to be the sort of structure where we have a foundation course and then we build blocks on top of that as we sort of go up the tree. But I don't think we can rely 100% on technology. I think we need some human interaction, but particularly if you're looking at the role and how someone's emotional intelligence perhaps rates. So what I do think is, having carried out this assessment of technology, you can then use it to control admission onto site. So if at induction you've proved your competence and those detailed certificates are logged in the system, then through face recognition or fingerprint, whatever you do for your site access system, they can only control those people that have got their competence measured through the initial induction, and then they can also flag up when that competence expires and when it's due to be renewed. So that's my view. Melanie, a different take on what competence looks like and some of the pitfalls I see. Thank you.
That's great, Steve. Thank you. I'm going to pass over to Paul now. Paul, if you can share your thoughts on it, that would be great.
Thank you, Melanie. Yeah, so, and thanks for the invitation to today. So yeah, it's a huge topic, both in terms of technology itself and skills of the industry, and how they come together in a really effective way to support wider industry. Again, just playing with this concept of competency, for me, it's having that sufficient knowledge, judgment and skills to deliver successful outcomes. Quite broad, but fundamentally to empower people to deliver what they're being tasked to do. And within the industry itself, there's a real range in how technology is influencing that. And I would start with technology being an enabler and a disruptor in that space as well, which is quite exciting. But as an enabler in terms of support and upskilling and the knowledge of the people within the industry, examples of technology improving the efficiencies and effectiveness of the processes we ask people to deliver. So again, from my own background, information management, the digital process has been a good example of that, and allowing machines and technology to provide solutions around validation, which sometimes were kind of manually done in the past. So that's a whole space in itself. And then technology enabling an enhanced ability to measure performance, and again, performance in its broadest term. So the old phrase, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And how does technology help us better assess, going back to the definition of competency, the outcomes that we're setting out to deliver? And that's really exciting in terms of becoming better at how we think about performance, and then working back from the performance, how we then deliver the right people and skills to deliver against that. So that's kind of initial kind of thoughts about how it comes together, but huge opportunities on how we support industry and the competencies that sit within. The other kind of areas probably to flag is kind of the disruptors within that space, and technology maybe having an impact on preconceived roles within the industry or new roles appearing. Melanie touched on kind of making elements autonomous in terms of delivery aspects of the role. So again, quite exciting. and it'll also bring new skill sets as well that we need to think about, and also linking to the opportunities, and I'll call it a disruptor in terms of attracting new talent within the industry if we become more digitally enabled, and how we deliver those outcomes. And there are lots of examples out there. And then just final thought is kind of technology being a vehicle to scale skills, scale competency across the industry, and thinking about that, how clients can have an impact, both in terms of how clients may procure, but also clients within the supply chain, be it tier one supporting their own supply chain in that space as well around the adoption of technology, and thinking about SMEs as well. So majority of businesses, I think 90 to 95% are SMEs, businesses below 50 in number. So kind of scaling that and how we get better value from technology is probably a key aspect as well. Perfect, but I will pause there and pass on to Stefan now with his thoughts.
Thank you, Paul. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Stefan Spear from Morgan Sindall. I was the Business Improvement Director for our construction division. I'm now the Technical Director, so have brought into our team digital construction, amongst other things. So technology is really high up there on my agenda. I'd just like to take us back really to the report of Raising the Bar. If you remember that report identified that competence was an issue within the construction industry generally, and kind of defined, amongst other things, 5 key areas around competence in terms of duty holders, in terms of the need for a competency framework for the various specialisms within the industry, that competence was going to be demonstrated and measured by third parties who'd be accredited to UCAS schemes, and that we should adopt the principle of continued professional development, CPD. So really, what does all of that mean? Well, for me, it means that we've got to start thinking about how we manage our processes, our policies, and our resources within each of our organisations. And then as an individual, we've got to make sure that we are the owners and custodians of our own development. So it's not for us, for individuals, for our companies or our line managers to have that duty of developing you. For me, it's you as an individual to take ownership of that, and to be able to demonstrate that you've got the right skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviours. So the onus really, I feel, is on the company to ensure that people have got those right skills, knowledge, and behaviours in a specific role. But then it's up for the individual to say, look, I don't believe I've got the relevant skills, knowledge, experience, and/or behaviours, if that's the case. So the question is, can technology help measure competence, and what's the pitfalls? And for me, technology definitely can help, but you need that starting line. You need that framework to be followed. And the BSI have kindly produced over the last year PAS standards 8670, 71, 72, and 73, which helps give that framework for organisations to start thinking about it. And the various professional bodies are putting their standards together to help as well. So the things that we have started to put into place at Morgan Sindall for some time, some of the things have already been mentioned around e-learning, a great means of sharing knowledge and information, but that's not providing you with the necessary skills, behaviours, or experience. So it can provide you with something there, can e-learning, but you need all of that experience, you need that knowledge, and you can, for me, my view is you can only get that whilst you're on the job, actually doing the job. And you need mentors and people to help you with all of that. But we've created an academy. That academy has got various competence matrices in for various roles. So that can help people identify what training, what knowledge, what experience they've got. It can record their CPD. And then as a result, it can help through online appraisals, recording all of that information to help individuals understand what additional training, knowledge, and experience people might need. So for me, the technology is an enabler. I think everybody has said that. Melanie, I think you said that. Steve definitely did, and Paul, in terms of the way that you was explaining things. Technology can definitely help, in my opinion. The tools that we've got, mentioned some of those by Paul earlier. The inductions, the CSCS cards, the ability to ensure that people are only going onto our construction site with those relevant qualifications. But it's what those relevant qualifications, what's actually needed for the individual roles. And we do need those consistent measures. And there is a requirement through, I think it's ISO 19650, for example, in the digital world, that we need to be measuring our designers in terms of competency. We can do all of that through the technology. We can record all of that, but we've got to put those checks and balances in first before we can actually start to measure, because what are we measuring if we've not got that baseline? So that's my thoughts on it. Open to any questions, I guess, really. And back to Melanie.
Thanks, Stefan. That was really interesting. There's a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat box. I'll maybe just touch on. Cliff has asked one, and a few people have come back just with their thoughts on it. But Steve, maybe this would be one for you. I suppose the question is competence assessments at induction too broad, because competency needs to be task specific? So I'm not sure if you want to share your thoughts on that one.
Yes, I did. I put them in the chat just to bat it straight back. I think, and this is interesting because this is how technology is evolving. I think Cliff and I probably used to doing an assessment where an induction where you turn up on the first day and do everything. What's happening more and more to save the guys on site time is that you do an online induction. So the majority of your sort of qualifications, CSCS cards, are all uploaded prior to you landing on site, which gives the site team the ability to validate it before you appear. So it's that competence assessment that's uploaded and validated that is then set in stone and then monitored through the site access system, so that if what you've uploaded, the dates are due to expire, the site access system might say, hey, next week your CSCS card expires, don't forget you need to update that. So Cliff's absolutely right. A general site induction would give a level of competence on that particular site, but not general competence. It's the general competence by way of certificates that are uploaded at the sort of pre-induction online that I was suggesting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect sense. That's great. There's another one in from Nisa, and I'll maybe direct this one at Paul and Stefan. So Nisa mentions that I suppose industry is still quite slow to change and to develop and to take on board new technology, albeit sometimes that can be the catalyst to encourage people to actually want to get more involved. So the question is just focusing on process and technology as a trigger is helping our reactiveness, but how would you suggest we increase the speed of transformation as an industry? How can measuring competence drive more rapid change? I'm not sure, Paul, do you want to go first on that one, and then I'll pass over to Stefan?
Yep, perfect. Yeah, so it's a good question, and you could probably look at it through a number of lenses, I suppose. I think fundamentally how can measuring competence drive more rapid change? I think there's this really interesting linkage between the tasks we're asked to deliver and how you measure whether that's been delivered successfully or performance as we see it, and the ability to become better as an industry of measuring the outcomes or the performance, I think, has a factor to play in this. Some of the work we're doing is around looking at a UK national metrics library, so a central repository for ways we might measure performance within the built environment. Now, taking that as a starting point and then working back as to how you then deliver against that performance. So that there's a linkage there around the task we're asked to deliver those outcomes. Other bigger issues, I think, is around the use case. We are liaising with and looking at strategies to support SMEs, and I suppose to deliver that change, there needs to be a business benefit in some of this investment in skills and around technology as well. So that return on investment or business benefit across industry, across SMEs, I think will be really important to scale some of these approaches and adoption of new skills and investment within technology as well. So I'll pause there, but I don't know if Stefan had anything else to add to that.
Sure, thanks, Paul. Measuring competence to drive more rapid change. Gosh, I think the industry is changing quite a lot at the moment. If you speak to people out in the industry, there's an awful lot of stuff coming at the industry, whether it be technology, whether it be legislation. The key about the measuring of the competence, however, though, is we need competent people in whatever role that they're doing, or people who are being trained by competent people to get them up to the levels that's necessary. So again, understanding what that level is that we need, whether you be an apprentice or a seasoned veteran and a director of an organisation, there are different competence requirements that's going to be imposed on one another. You've mentioned behaviours in the question, and behaviours is absolutely critical, because behaviours, I guess, through technology is going to be extremely difficult to measure, if not impossible, because those behaviours, you can record how people can demonstrate that they've got the right behaviour, I guess. But actually measuring it, I don't know. I think I'd struggle with that. We can set the behaviours that we're looking for, which will help to drive more rapid change, and we can measure the competence of individuals and of organisations to make sure that we've got the right people in the right place at the right time to deliver the right requirements. But for me, a lot of this gets down to process. If, as Melanie has said earlier, if we've got the process right, we know which tech we can use. If we know what tech we can use, we can train the people to use the tech. The tech provides the data becomes information, hopefully that information becomes knowledge for people. And the piece of the resistance is we've got people who are wise and can use all of that, the wisdom bit. And that's how we want to be, for me, getting people through the journey. We've got to get those wise people who can understand all of the data, all of the information, and not just understand that the process, in the Little Britain quote of computer says no, that's no good for me. We need people to actually understand why we're going through that process, because then we get all of that continuous improvement that drives that more rapid change.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you said there, Stefan. The other thing I just wanted to add to that was just around the competence matrix that you had mentioned, and I'm sure yours does this as well, but I've seen other organizations and they will have a competence matrix, and they will have, for example, their new graduates or apprentices, for example, on that matrix, and they will also have a 25-year time served joiner, for example. They've completely different skills, completely different competencies, but what, generally speaking, the apprentice or the new graduate will have are digital skills, and they are digital natives. And again, then we'll have people who have lots of really good experience as well. And using those kind of competence matrix allows you to actually match those people up together and cross over those skills, and then they do like a knowledge share almost amongst themselves as well. And I think that's a good way to create that rapid change that you're looking for, by having different types of people in an organization and then sort of marrying up those different competencies together to drive it forward at pace. But having a matrix like that makes it transparent, so you can see what you have, you can see where the knowledge is, and then you can start to make those matches between the different people to complement that then as well.
Can I just raise a point there? I think what Stefan was saying about the measurement of behaviour is such a crucial question that is very difficult to answer, and we can only really do it by measuring the outcomes, which is what I think Paul was saying, and trying to link the good outcome back to good behaviour through technology. Big question mark for me. I can't really at the moment. I'm seeing how we can link behaviours in some respects to outcomes, and the culture change and the behavioural change that we're driving for in procurement and other things should lead to better outcomes. But I don't see where the technology fits in this, and I'm interested in thinking how it can help, because as you know, we've got a lot of challenges in just getting an industry-wide metric associated with quality, similar to the safety metric we have with the AFR. So I'm just thinking where technology, dream the dream. How could technology actually help to measure behaviour? I think that's something that we need to really put some deep thought into.
Cliff, if I just interject, I think my view would be that the technology helps with the process, and through that technology, if you're moving away from that process, then there's a reason behind it, and then it's that behaviour that we can test. It might be that the process is wrong, and therefore we're getting the continuous improvement that's necessary, because we should always be looking for those improvements, in my mind. And if there is something that isn't right, then the behaviour that we'd be looking for is it's not done. And if the technology can ensure that people doing the right thing in the right way at the right time, then that's how technology can help. But again, yeah, absolutely right. Measuring behaviours through tech is going to be, I don't know how. And what is the right behaviour at the right time? It's got to be getting it right.
Could I ask a question of the panel? I mentioned this SCEB thing, so skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviour. And I wonder whether we thought, if you increase an individual's skill, knowledge, and experience, will that improve his behaviour? So if he knows better, if she knows better, will they behave better? Question for the panel, from the panel member. What do we think?
I think they should behave better if they know better. I think if they're informed, they should be making more informed decisions. But I suppose it comes down to human nature. People will do what people do. And sometimes if there's an option to take a shortcut, they may still do it. But I think if they're educated and informed, then they should be making the right decisions. So knowledge is power, and I would encourage it.
So what I'm saying is, if we can use technology to assess skills, knowledge, and experience, establish a benchmark, and then improve it, is a byproduct of doing that behaviour. However you assess it, and I agree with the rest of the panel, I think it's difficult to do it with technology, but I think in conversation you could probably do it. But just a thought.
Steve, we're human, aren't we? And gosh, we can all make strange decisions when we look back. You know, which side of the bed did we wake up on? You know, it's a really interesting thing. There's things that happen in life, and you just think, how on earth did that happen? And then somebody will turn around, why did you make that decision? He said, sorry, I don't know. Just something happened. So it's peculiar, but the skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviour, I do like that definition, and the frameworks that have been put together by the BSI. If you've not had opportunity to have a look at them, I recommend you would, because they're particularly for the construction industry, principal designer, principal contractors, they are really useful.
And I suppose the other thing that we should say, as it's a GIRI event, GIRI is all about changing behaviour. You know, that's what all the GIRI training is about, is changing the way we behave as individuals in terms of quality, like we've made the change over the last 10 years in terms of health and safety. So GIRI training.
The next question I think focuses on behaviour as well, but this one is more client behaviour. So the question is, how do we encourage clients to embrace the construction playbook to deliver standardisation, long-term strategy, including resource planning, allowing for skills and competence training? Steve, I'm not sure if you want to come in on that one. I think it's a client behaviour related one.
Yeah, thanks for that, Melanie. Yeah.
Just seen you switch your camera off there, so I thought I'd bring you back in.
Yeah, I was going to hide. I think it's a very good question. Hopefully, you thought, and I don't want to insult any clients, but you'd think that any intelligent client would see why the construction playbook was drafted and what the benefits are of utilising the direction that you're given there. How do you make clients? Well, it would be good if we could have technology that measured how clients embrace the construction playbook. I must admit, as a framework bid writer, I always have to write how we as a contractor are going to respond to the construction playbook. So maybe if there was a measure on every project, I don't know whether this gold standard puts metrics against the construction playbook, but I understand it's how frameworks are being told to implement the ideas of the playbook. So in summary, firstly, you'd hope they'd see why it was drafted and what the benefits are. Secondly, as we said earlier, what gets measured gets done. Perhaps we need to measure clients on their alignment to the construction playbook. Just a thought.
I think
I'll keep my video on this time.
Okay. I think just from my perspective, I think there's an awareness piece around the construction playbook as well, because I know a lot of the clients that I would work with in particular, you know, they want to build schools or build hospitals or healthcare or something like that, but their area of specialty isn't necessarily in construction. So they're not looking to these documents. They're looking at their area of specialty as well, and I suppose their core competencies, and they're expecting the team that are providing these things instead to be delivering them as efficiently and as effectively as possible. But I think there's a knowledge piece there as well, just informing clients about the construction playbook and the reasons why we do a lot of these things then as well.
There's Melanie, can I just comment on that as well, if that's okay?
Please.
Yeah. So on the client side as well, I think it's an upskilling piece within client organisations around both the opportunities of digital and technology as well. Within our existing role, supporting authorities look at, for example, that there's sometimes perceptions that supply chain contractors who develop very detailed, very effective digital information at handover, there's a perception that sometimes it isn't used, or it's kind of not being utilised as it should. So there's probably a growing need to support clients in that upskilling. One of the areas we looked at within one of our programs was creating a baseline skill set for project directors, within clients and public bodies and senior responsible officers. And it was our kind of first attempt to try to support and identify areas for either additional resource or development. And it was an online tool to try to kind of harmonise that baselining of key client project leaders, basically. So just another example of trying to ensure that clients understand the opportunities on their side as well.
Yeah, definitely. Stefan, I'm going to pick on you next because it's directed specifically to you, this question. So this one's from Rupert. At what point can you get wise people to forecast the competence profile in the future, such that experience bit of competence can be developed in time for when you need it?
Thanks, Rupert. Well, I think we as an industry and people in senior positions within organisations need to be looking at the people all of the time. It's people who make the world go round, and whether it's profiling competence, whether it's profiling the number of people that you're bringing into the industry through via apprenticeships or traineeships or whatever you're looking at. It's like that wheel of as people leaving the industry, we need to be filling those gaps. So we need to be understanding where those gaps are. You've asked about competence profile of the future. I think quite a number of us on this call we're here because we'll be thinking about what is that competence profile actually going to look like in terms of utilising technology. And Melanie brought the subject up of some of the experienced people and the earlier career people having the kind of the technological skill set, and bringing them together and merging them will kind of help with all of that change. But those wise people are looking at the people within the organisation all of the time. They won't stop looking at that. They will be always looking at the roles that we've got within our businesses. But if you recall, Rupert, one of the things that I did say in my opening 5 minutes is the onus of your development, whatever role you're in, is up to you as an individual, in my mind.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to paraphrase just with this question. So there's been a few comments just around, I suppose, the importance of the culture in an organisation to ensure that there's this competency, and that it comes from the senior team really, and that they're helping to drive this on down through. So I suppose just welcome the thoughts of the group on that. So in terms of culturally and encouraging the senior leadership team to take a lead on what we do in terms of competency going forward, driving forward that business culture really to make sure that we're getting it right. Steve, I see you've just put a comment in there. In my opinion, business culture drives individual behaviour. So I think you've started to answer that one already.
And again, I'm going to ask for a fee from Cliff if I have to carry on doing this. But I think the GIRI training in terms of leadership, both leadership of businesses and leadership of projects, is key, because you won't move the individuals unless you move the leadership. And I think to talk about these matters that probably aren't talked about every board meeting, more's the pity, is what we need to do to get the change that we need to deliver the quality that we need. So I think we need to, yeah, absolutely, it's top down and bottom up. But if you haven't got the board on board, you're not going to turn the ship around, unfortunately, in my opinion.
See, Cliff has his hand up there.
Myself off mute. There we are. Yeah, I think it is a good point that you need the leadership on board. I also like Stefan's point that, you know, individuals aren't going to become more competent unless they want to. You know, horses, water, drinking situation. businesses can do what they can in terms of using their technology to measure the levels of competency within their organizations, use the technology to identify areas in the future that they're going to need to fill because their workloads are going in that direction. If we're going to get our boards to be discussing these type of issues, it's got to eventually relate to the bottom line, because if it doesn't, then the businesses cease to exist. So within GIRI, when we set out on the journey, we were talking about productivity, because it's that productivity and efficiency that are the lifeblood of successful organisations. And I think in terms of the discussions today and the questions, which I think are all really interesting, it comes back to thinking about those behaviours at all levels, leadership, management, and on the park, as to how we can be better at what we do. And getting individuals to think about that, as Stefan says, is crucial. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. I think there's just one more question that I haven't picked up on yet, and this one's from Ron. So he's just put in the comments there, how to achieve safety and quality, really that's the question. So contracts to allow adequate time and funding to be completed by experienced people who understand the product. So he's kind of asked the question and answered it himself there as well. But I suppose just asking the group really what they think on achieving safety and quality, and do we need more time? Do we need more money to do that? I'll maybe go with Stefan this time.
If we recall some time ago, when GIRI pulled together the report, a number of things came out of that report, and planning was one of the key aspects of everything that came about to deliver a quality project and a safe project. And if you don't put the time in at the beginning to get the planning right and give yourself time to think, then you are not going to achieve the outputs of the project requirements, no matter how much funding you have and money to spend. It is, for me, it's all about the planning. If you know what the requirements are, if you've got that early engagement, you've put the plans in place, you know who you're going to need to work on that project, and you know how and when. So I couldn't stress enough, spend time planning. It's like, what's that phrase? I saw a really interesting piece by one of the famous scientists talking about problems, and said, if I've got a problem, I'll spend 95% of my time thinking about the problem and 5% of the time thinking about the solution. So yeah, definitely planning for me.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'm just looking through the comments. I think I've picked up on all the questions. Lisa has put in just a little link there to the Centre for Digital Built Britain as well. So again, lots of useful resources on there as well, particularly around encouraging that culture change and the adoption of new ways of working. So I'm sure that one's well worth looking up as well. I think I've picked up on all of the questions, but if I've missed anybody, if you want to jump in or pop it in the question box now, that would be great. But I think that's all the questions, Cliff, that we have at the moment.
Okay, well, we're now close to closing time, as they say. I think that's been a very useful roundabout discussion on the subject that we set out to, and thank you very much to Steve and Melanie and Paul and Stefan for giving us their time today to give us their views. I hope it's prompted some thinking amongst those who've attended. I think, I suppose I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think this behaviour issue is something that's challenged the industry for a long time. We've had a number of different reports on what would make the industry better. We've had the Egans and the Lathams, and more recently Mark Farmer, with some very good suggestions of how things could be improved. but we really need to implement. And I think that's where the behaviour comes in, and today's thinking about how technology can be used to identify where the gaps are and what we need to do about them is a serious consideration. So thanks very much for that, and thank you very much for all those who attended. We're thinking about having another forum later on, possibly this month, or we have an insurance webinar also being planned. So hopefully you can join us again in the future.